On page number 329, and we saw that last week that Hanumanji was there, right? Had a good conversation with Sita Mata. Now he is going to make his presence known. Because it's not कि Sita Mata को ही मिलना था. He had to make sure to leave some kind of a message over there. So the terrible Vanar. Hanuman knew how short his time was. He prostrated himself, his little monkey's form at Sita's feet. When she had blessed him, he rose, and his eyes were full of promises and tears. He bowed again to her deeply, and then he left her. When Hanuman had not gone far, a thought struck him with some force. He said to himself, I crossed the ocean to find Sita, and I have found her, nobler than I had imagined, and sadder too. But I must not leave Lanka like a thief. I must make my presence felt. I must strike some fear into the hearts of these Rakshasas. The best soldier is the one who achieves more than he was told to. I have already done what I was sent for. I have leaped the waves, found Sita, and given her the ring Ram sent. But how much more I will accomplish if I provoke the Rakshas army and discover how strong it is. How much cleverer I will be if I can meet Ravan face to face. He knew it was dangerous, but an inner voice urged him to be a little rash. Hanuman decided impulsively. This Ashok one must be Ravan's favorite garden. That is why he has kept Sita here. Let me ruin this pretty garden with its clipped plants and trees. When Ravan hears of it, he will send his guards to attack me. When I crush that force, the Rakshas will tremble on his throne. For if I can do this, who am only a messenger, what will happen to him when Ram arrives with Sugriva's army and Jamvan's? Growing vast in a moment and roaring in the anger, he felt at Sita's ordeal. Hanuman began to wreck the Ashok one. He uprooted trees and snapped their trunks like twigs. He stirred whirlpools in the lily ponds so they broke their banks and spilled over, mudding their crystal waters. He smashed down the carefully heaped rockeries. He trampled beds of exotic plants brought here from distant corners of the earth. In no time, he devastated the Ashok one. Resuming his little monkey's form, he climbed onto the flat top of a stone pillar and sat, waiting for word to reach Ravan. The Rakshasas in the little temple had been startled awake by the commotion in the Ashok one. They were terrified to see the great Vanar, like a golden tempest, destroying the king's garden. The birds that roosted in the garden rose into the sky in screaming swarms, like clouds of doom. The deer, peacock, and other tame creatures dashed about in panic. The Rakshasas vaguely remembered having seen Sita talking to a little monkey in what they thought was a demented grief. Now they ran to her, crying, Who is this creature? But Sita replied, Ask one serpent about another. He must be a Rakshasa who can assume any form he likes. I know nothing of him, and I fear him as much as you do. The Rakshasas fled to Ravan with their tale of the monkey who had wrecked the Ashok one. We saw Sita with the creature, they said, but now she denies knowing the monkey. He may be a servant of one of your enemies, Kuber or Indra, come to spy on your city. Or he may be Ram's messenger, for he sat talking to Sita. If you don't believe us, Lord, come and look at the Ashok one. He has uprooted every tree in it, save one, the Shimshup, under which Sita sat. He must die for this. Tears of rage burned Ravan's crimson eyes. He clapped his hands and sent a company of his palace guard to deal with Hanuman. Ravan sent 800 Rakshasas to the ruined garden. They surrounded the monkey who sat chattering and snarling at them on the round pillar outside the garden. At first, they laughed to see how small he was. They could not believe he had ravaged the Ashok one by himself. But the moment the Rakshasas went to seize the little monkey, he stood up, stretched, and in a wink he was enormous. His head was in the sky, and his golden eyes blazing. He growled down at them dreadfully. The gigantic Varner beat his chest, and that noise reverberated through Lanka, shaking Ravan's palace to its foundations. Hanuman roared at the Rakshas. Ram and Lakshman are with King Sugriv of the Vanars. Glory be to them. I am Hanuman, the wind's son, and I serve Ram. I flew across the sea to find Sita, and I will make you sorry before I leave your infernal city. Some of them growing huge themselves, the Rakshas rushed at him. Hanuman pulled up the pillar he sat on and smashed them with it, killing a wave of demons. Their screams rang through the sea air. Their blood and brains were spattered across the ruined garden. Scarlet gore flowed in streams. In a trice, unbelievably, that entire contingent lay mangled with lifeless. Hanuman's roars of triumph rang through Lanka, and the city quaked again. Word reached Ravan, and he could hardly believe what he heard. He called his minister, Parhast's son, Jambumali, one of his ablest young commanders, and sent him forth with a bigger force. Crying again that he was Ram's servant, Hanuman wiped out this legion as well, beating it to bloody pulp with the pillar. Jambu Mali himself was a great warrior, strong and arrogant, fierce and handsome. He came into the battle roaring as only a noble born Rakshas can. He shot a sizzling clutch of arrows at Hanuman. His fur quivering, Hanuman stood very still at the first wounds, wounds he received. A slow smile spread on his face, and one by one he plucked out young Jambumali's shafts from his flesh like thorns. Then an earth-shaking duel erupted between them. Seizing up boulders from the Ashok once despoiled rock gardens, Hanuman hurled them at the Rakshas. But Jambu Mali's arrows were wizardly, and they blew the stones into dust. Then Hanuman twirled his pillar above his head and flung it like a javelin at the young Rakshas, smashing him against a wall, crushing his chest, and he died with an incredulous look on his face. From his window, Ravan watched in mounting fury. He wrote to his ministers to send another legion against Hanuman, who stood towering and pleased as he could be in the streaming sun. The remains of the first two forces lay around his feet. Rakshas's blood splashed everywhere as if in some horrible offering. Five ministers sent 5 warrior sons at the head of the biggest detachment yet. They marched up the cobbled streets of Lanka like thunder rolling to quell Hanuman. But the Vanar was implacable, he was invincible. With the pillar he retrieved from Jambu Mali's chest, he raised that contingent as easily as the others. Hanuman was enjoying himself. His fur was colored with the Rakshas's blood, and he danced among the dead, still crying out Ram's name and that Hanuman was his servant. He cried that he was just one among thousands of Vanars, most of them greater than he, who, who would soon descend on Lanka. Ravan was astonished. Never had he encountered such prowess save once long ago. The Rakshas called for his own son now, the mighty Aksha, wearing silver mail, his bow in his hand. Aksh was like the first flame that leaps up in the Yajna pit when the Brahman pours libation onto the fire. Ravan blessed his valiant boy. The splendid prince climbed into his chariot and rode at Hanuman. When he saw the Vanar looming before him, he stood up in awe. With an echoing roar, Aksh attacked. Hanuman smiled. He thought how handsome and noble this boy was, and then quickly how marvelously he fought. Aksha's arrows fell out of the sky like deadly rain. In a wink, Hanuman was a tiny monkey, dodging those shafts. Then again he was enormous, and cast rocks and trees like lances at Aksh. The ocean trembled to watch the battle between Rava's son and Hanuman. On they fought fiercely and cleverly, and Hanuman thought, I like this dauntless boy so much, I don't want to kill him. But what can I do? The fire that rages must be put out, or it consumes one. With a sigh, Hanuman smashed down Aksh's horses with a stone pillar. Crying out weirdly, Aksh rose into the sky with Maya. But as he drew back his bowstring, the Vanar plucked him from the air as if he were an annoying fly. Blessing the young Rakshas in his heart, Hanuman dashed his head like lightning against a stone wall. When their prince died, Aksha's legion panicked and fled back to their master of darkness in his Sabha. Ravan sat, ten headed and terrifying, before his ministers. He was aflame. A tremor ran through his lean body when he heard Aksh was slain. No muscle on his faces twitched to show the grief that clutched him like a pang of death, but 9 of 10 heads shut their eyes in a prayer. The 10th central one called for his eldest son, the awesome Indrajit, master of astras, and to be his father's equal in battle. His lips pale at what the monkey in his garden had done. The streets of Lanka flowed Rakshas blood. Ravan said to his prince, Your brother and your friends have died. It seems no legion can stand against this monkey. Let alone take him. Go, my son, bring him to me. Softly he added, Bring him alive. Indrajit walked around his father in Pradakshina. Then that Rakshas prince went to tame the Vanar in the Ashok one. Any question before we start the next chapter? No. Okay, the coils of an astra. Sweeping through Lanka in his chariot like a dark wind, Indrajit flew at Hanuman. When he neared the Vanar, he pulled on his bowstring and Lanka echoed with the sound. Hanuman responded with a burst of wild laughter that here at last was a worthy adversary. The exhilaration of battle was upon him and he longed for a keen fight. They fought outside Ravan's palace. The Rakshas prince and the marauding monkey, tall as a tree, like thunderstorms colliding, they fought, roaring exuberantly, the air between them thick with Indrajit's arrows and Hanuman's rocks and trees. Occasionally, both of them paused, panting, for neither gave any quarter or yielded an inch of ground. Indrajit was amazed at this monkey who shrugged off his most lethal missiles. And Hanuman wondered at the young Rakshasa who was unharmed by his barrage of everything heavy he could lay his hands on. He tore up flagstones and steps of rock and flung them, spinning like chakras, at Ravan's son, only to see them shot into powder. At last, Indrajit drew an exceptional arrow from his quiver. He shut his eyes, invoking Brahma, the creator, ancestor of the Rakshas. Once, out of affection for his great great grandson, Brahma had given Indrajit his own astra. Hanuman grew still at the Brahma mantra. He folded his hands. The astra flamed at him through the sky. Out of his bhakti, he would not escape it, but allowed it to bind him in hoops of light. He sprawled on the ground, apparently vanquished. Hanuman said to himself softly, The boy doesn't know that by Brahma's own boon to me, his astra can hold me only for a moment. But I want to see Ravan face to face before I fly out of Lanka. And this is my chance. I am not afraid. Vayu, my father, and his friend Agni protect me. He lay protesting while they thought the astra's power had conquered him. The Rakshasas crowded around and bound him once more with the longest ropes and strips of bark they could find. As soon as the coils of rope touched Hanuman's body, the coils of the astra vanished. All the great astras are haughty. None will stand for their bonds beside its own. When he saw them running at the fallen monkey with their ropes, Indrajit cried out to his soldiers to stop, but they did not hear him in the commotion. Ravan's son thought that now there would be no restraining Hanuman, but to his surprise, the Vanar lay where he had fallen and allowed himself to be bound and dragged before the Lord of Lanka in his palace. Puzzled, Indrajit went with the monkey to his father's Sabha. So you can see that Hanuman wanted to be caught. It's not that he was weak, but he wanted to leave a message with Ravan himself. Okay. So any question? You guys know why they are calling this Indrajit a great great grandson of Brahma? You guys know the lineage? No? How come you didn't ask? Okay. So, Ravan's father's name is Vishrav. 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 That's Ravan's father. And Ravan's grandfather, Rishi Pulaste. And Rishi Pulaste is Manas Putra of Brahma. Okay, so that's how this lineage is. Okay, so Brahma, Rishi Pulaste, and then Vishnu, and then Ravana, then Indrajit. So that's why it's said that his great great grandson. Okay, got it now? तभी तो कहते हैं कि even if the ancestors are great, our journey is with our own actions, our own karam. Okay, see Pulaste Rishi, we worship him, but Ravan, we don't even like to hear his name, Ravan, right? So now Ravan's Sabha. When he was brought into Ravan's presence, Hanuman opened his eyes, which he had screwed shut as if in pain as he was hauled along the smooth floors of the palace. He saw Ravan smoldering above him, tall and darkly magnificent. A golden crown on his head reflected shafts of light from pearl, diamond, and ruby. The Rakshas wore the same flowing white silk Hanuman had seen him in that morning. He sat very still on his throne above the Vanar at his feet. The scent of sandalwood paste with which Ravan's body was anointed filled his sabha. Noble, wise, and terrible as well were the demon's eyes. They now searched Hanuman's face curiously, fiercely. Ravan wore a necklace of pearls around his neck, some big as a pigeon's eggs, and around his rippling arms he wore heavy bracelets of gold and coral. He sat on his throne of black crystal with his ministers around him, Parhast, Nikumb, and the others. The Rakshas of Indrajit's garden had dragged Hanuman here roughly. But when he lay at Ravan's feet and looked up at the splendor that was this great Rakshas, the Vanar was dazzled. He stared at the demon, and unable to tear his eyes from the king of Lanka, Hanuman stared on. He thought, what strength, what majesty! Yet he is evil. If he had not taken the path of night, the left hand way, this Rakshas could have been king of the Devas if he wanted. I have never seen such presence, such power, but then he is cruel and ruthless. He is a creature of darkness and his heart knows no mercy. Ravan, who had his name because he made the worlds tremble, gazed down into the Hanuman's tawny eyes, gauging him shrewdly and swiftly, so the monkey felt his very soul being scrutinized. The Rakshas felt a stab of fear and thought, is this Shiva's bull come to Lanka? as he swore he would when I hefted Mahadev's mountain? Is this Nandi come as a monkey to announce my death, or is it Banasurs come to kill me? Slowly, the fire that slumbered in the depths of his eye blazed up to their surface. In the fearful glow, Ravan turned 10 heads at his minister Parhast, who had also just lost his son to Hanuman. Sibilantly, the king said, "Who is he? Where has he come from? What does he want? That he destroyed my Ashok one and killed so many of my warriors, that he killed my son. Ask him." Parhast turned to Hanuman, who lay trussed on the floor. "Answer without fear, monkey. You will not be harmed. If you tell the truth, did Indra send you here as a spy? Or was it Vishravan, Kuber, or Yam? Or perhaps Vishnu, the enemy of our people, sent you? You are not just a monkey. That much is obvious from your courage. Tell us who you are." But Hanuman was not about to answer a mere minister. He indicated that he wished to stand. When he was helped to his feet, he turned and addressed Ravan. "Not Yam, Kuber, or Varun sent me. Not at Vishnu's command did I come. This is no disguise but my true form, for I am a Vanar. I wanted to meet you face to face, Lord of the Rakshasas, and so I raised the Ashok one. Your soldiers I slew only to defend myself, because they came to kill me. No astra may bind me, Ravan, for Brahma himself has given me that power. I allowed myself to be bound with these puny ropes because I wanted to speak to you. Listen to what I have to say, and it may profit you, O Emperor." Ravan was Ravan said nothing. He only stared at the monkey, waiting for him to continue. Hanuman said, "Ravan of Lanka, I have come to your city at the command of my king Sugriv of the Vanars. He wishes you well and asks you to pay heed to the message he sends." This is Sugriv's message. "There was a noble king in the house of Ikshvaku, whose valor and dharma were immaculate, and his name was Dashrath. Ram is his eldest son. Ram is a Kshatriya and a prince of truth. To keep his father's honor, he went to the Dandakwan for an exile of 14 years. With Ram went his wife Sita and his brother Lakshman. One day, Janak's daughter Sita was lost in the jungle. In anguish, Ram journeyed to Rishimukh. There he met Sugriv, who had been driven from his kingdom by his brother Vali. Ram and Sugriv swore a covenant that Ram would restore his kingdom to Sugriv, and that in return Sugriv would find Sita wherever she was. Ravan listened. 20 ferocious eyes turned unwinkingly on Hanuman. The monkey went on without pausing. "Ravan of Lanka has surely heard of the valor of Vali of the Vanars. Ram killed that same Vali with one arrow from his unearthly quiver and set Sugriv on the ebony throne of Kishkanda. To honor their pact, Sugriv sent out an army of Vanars to find Sita north and east, west and south. He sent them. They are mighty monkeys of my ancient race. Some fly through the air like Garud, and others as swiftly as Vayu. I am Hanuman, the wind's son by Anjana, and I leaped across the ocean in quest of Sita. Imagine my surprise, great king, knower of Dharma, when I saw the lovely Sita grieving in your Ashok one. I thought, how can one so noble and renowned as Ravan of the Rakshasas, Ravan of matchless tapasya, hold another man's wife against her will? You are a person of superior intelligence. You should never have become entangled in such shame. Which Dev or Danav, Asur or Rakshas, Lord of Lanka, shall stand against the astras of Ram and Lakshman?" Ravan still said nothing. Hanuman stared straight into his eyes in cool defiance, as no one ever dared to. The Vanar said, "I saw Sita. I am surprised that a king of your wisdom harbors a serpent in your palace with such tender affection. Like the choicest food mixed with poison, she will prove more than you can digest. Ravan, she will be your undoing." Heed what I say. Return her to Ram, who pines for her. Give her back today. She is dangerous. You are a Tapaswin. For one who sat for as long as you did in penance, what is a woman? Even the most beautiful one. I have been told it was incomparable dhyan that blessed you with invincibility against Deva and Asur. And you vanquished Indra and Kuber. But Ravan, you forget that Sugriv is neither a Dev of light nor an Asur of darkness. He is not a Gandharv, a Yaksh, a Panag, great Rakshasa. Sugriv is a monkey and Ram is a man. Are you invincible against these two? Think well before it is too late and Nemesis comes hunting you. Long have you enjoyed the fruit of your tapasya, but the time to pay for your sins is near. Will you be able to withstand the human princes and the Vanars? Or will they bring you your death? I appeal to your wisdom, Ravana of Lanka. Remember how Vali died. Think back on Janasathan and the slaughter of Hersh's army. Think of today and what I have done to your garden and your army. I say to you, even I, who am just one small monkey, could raise your fabled Lanka, for I am on the side of Dharam while you are on the other. Ravan's eyes were eloquent with fury, but he said nothing. Hanuman went on bravely and calmly still, only quiet reason in his voice. You think of Ram's wife as just another woman, but she is the deep and dark night that will eclipse the glory of Lanka. She will prove to be the end of all your majesty. She is the noose you have tied around your own neck, as if death were dearer to you than life. She is the fire of truth, which you kindle close to your deluded heart. Rakshas, she will make ashes of you and your city. Ram is he who can incinerate the universe. He can put out the stars with his arrows and create them again. Save yourself from his wrath. Save your people, your women and children. Save this beautiful Lanka. When Ram comes, what I did in your Ashokwan shall seem as a trifle compared to what he will do. Not Brahma, Indra, or three-eyed Rudra will save you then. Ravan's eyes flashed like some unthinkable beast of prey. The Rakshas growled low in his throat. Kill him. But his brother Vibhishan cried, My lord, to kill the monkey is against the dharma of kings. Don't let your anger get the better of you. You must not kill a messenger. Think of a less drastic punishment for him. But Ravan snarled, 10 heads at once, his eyes on fire. There's no sin in killing a despoiler and a murderer. Hasn't he killed Jambumali, Aksh, and 10,000 others? Hasn't he desolated my Ashokwan? Haven't I sat here listening to his taunts and his abuse, which no king would tolerate? Vibhishan said quietly, On no account should a messenger be killed. He is our enemy, and he must pay for what he has done. Whip him, maim him even, shave his head, and scar his body with your wrath, but do not have him killed. The law of kings does not permit it. Moreover, he is just a lowly messenger. If you have put him, if you have him put to death, all you gain will be an evil name for yourself. Send an army against the human princes whose emissary he is. That is just, and the wise will not censure you, but say that Ravan kept his temper even when he was gravely provoked. The 10 heads nodded slowly, but in his heart, Ravan wondered, Is this Vishnu who has come as this monkey to kill me? Or is it Brahma? Or the Par Brahm itself, the Holy Spirit incarnate? With some effort, the demon of Lanka curbed his anger. Okay. So next chapter, the monkey's tail. Calming himself, Ravan said to his brother, You are right, Vibhishan. I will not have the monkey killed, but I must punish him for the havoc he has brought to our city. The heads whispered evilly among themselves. Then a slow smile wreathed the central face. Ravan said, "Nothing is more precious to a monkey than his tail. Let this monkey's fine tail be set on fire. Let him be sent back with a burned stump behind him to show that he crossed my path. Yes, let the monkey's tail be lit and let him be marched through the streets of Lanka. Let my people mock him for what he did today." He nodded to his guards, who ran out to fetch a length of cloth. They wound the fabric tightly around Hanuman's tail. At first, Hanuman glowered. He bared his fangs and snarled at his captors. But then he thought, if I allow myself to be paraded through the streets of Lanka, I will be able to see the city by daylight. What I observe will be useful later when we bring our army against Ravana. He allowed his tail to be wrapped, dipped in oil, and set alight. He let Ravan's guards drag him out of the palace and into the dazzling sun. They hauled him through the city, while the Rakshasas lined the streets, jeering and taunting him. Hanuman went quietly, as if no fight was left in him, while his tail blazed, though he felt no pain yet. The Rakshasas of the Ashok one ran to Sita and cried triumphantly, "Your friend, the red faced monkey, is being paraded through our streets with his tail on fire." Tears springing in her eyes, Sita turned away from them. She began to pray fervently to Agni, god of fire. "If it is true that I have been faithful to Ram, true that I have kept my vows, and that my mind has always been pure, then don't let Hanuman, who leaped across the sea to find me, who braved every danger to bring Ram's message to me, be burned by your flames. Let your touch upon his tail be as cool as the caress of his father Vayu." At once Agni was soft as sandalwood paste on Hanuman's tail, and Vayu blew gently around his heroic son. The Vanar wondered that the flames that encircled his golden tail did not hurt him at all. He thought, "My tail burns fiercely, yet I feel only a wonderful coolness, as if someone anointed me with the tender sandalwood paste. Oh, this is even more marvelous than the mountain that rose from the waves. But why should I marvel? Varun of the ocean is so devoted to Ram that he made Menak receive me. Why should I wonder that Agni has decided not to burn my tail when he knows whom I serve?" Then his wise heart informed him, "Sita prays for me. And of course, Agni is my father's friend." He felt he had seen all there was to see in Lanka. He gave a roof rattling roar, and in a blink, Hanuman was as tall as the loftiest tower in that city. The next moment, he was the little monkey of the Ashokwan again, small as a cat, and he leaped nimbly onto the nearest rooftop. The ropes that bound him fell away from his body in a listless pile. He jumped down into the street again, growing as he fell, until he was bigger than he had yet been in Lanka. Pulling up a pillar that stood at an intersection of streets, he struck out at the Rakshasas who attacked him. Felling 100, the rest fled. Great Hanuman stood roaring at the heart of wonderful Lanka, and his tail blazed behind him like a quenchless torch. Then, monkey that he was, he squatted on the ground, scratching his golden fur, wondering what to do next. What he had come for was accomplished, but another yearning tugged at his mind, the itch of the fire in his tail. Hanuman thought, "The Ashok one is ruined. I have killed many of Ravan's best warriors today, and their blood runs through this evil city. I have killed one of the Rakshas's sons. Still, my heart is not content. The fire in my tail has been kind to me, but it has been deprived of its fuel. Let me return the favor of my father's friend Agni. I will set alight these fine mansions of Lanka to feed his hunger." Hanuman was a streak of lightning among the rooftops. He sprang from roof to roof, setting Lanka on fire with his burning tail, while the wind billowed around him, fanning the flames. Houses caught, and the palaces of the nobles blazed as the conflagration spread. Hanuman, roaring in delight, raced all over the city, touching it aflame with his tail as if he were lighting 1,000 lamps for worship at Sandhya. Rakshas, men, women, and children poured out of their homes. All the city echoed with their cries as their fabulous dwellings, created by Vishwakarma, crackled and burned, and everything within them, the spoils of 100 wars, was consumed by Hanuman's inferno. Priceless silks, brocades, and tapestries were ashes. The gold of Lanka melted and flowed into the livid streets, and the hearts of precious jewels were snuffed out in the flames that enveloped Ravan's capital. Their pillars cracking in the incendiary heat, mansions came crashing down. When he had put much of Lanka to the torch, Hanuman sprang high into the air and landed with a mighty tremor on the roof of the Ravan's palace. The Varner ran across that roof, big itself as a city, touching every corner ablaze with his raging tail. Ravan's palace caught and burned like straw. The Agni in the monkey's tail was fierce and exhilarant, the breath with which his father the wind fanned the flames. The harems disgorged their delectable women, screaming above the roar of the fire and the howl of the wind. Hanuman was an apocalyptic beast, exulting as the city burned, roaring his joy to the sky, beating his chest like thunder, celebrating the triumph of the natural jungle over the city of artifice. From Ravan's palace roof, the Vanar saw that most of the Lanka burned. He saw more houses collapse in slides of rubble and sparks. Smiling to himself, still immense, he leaped straight from the king's palace to the nearby peak of the Trikut. The wind wrapped himself lovingly around his son. Hanuman looked behind him and saw his tail still burned with the friendly fire guard's cool flames, his proud tail that had gutted magnificent Lanka. He jumped down onto the white beach below, the cries of the stunned Rakshasas still ringing in his ears. He dipped his tail hissing into the waves and put out the exceptional fire, which had not singed a hair of him. At the very moment when he thanked pristine Agni with all his heart, a terrible thought struck Hanuman like an arrow. He whimpered aloud at it. I have committed a sin of rage. The wise restrain themselves, but I gave into anger. Sita must have burned with the rest of the city. Everything has been vain. I have ruined Ram's life. Hanuman stood at the foot of the Trikut and turning his face to the blazing city, he howled long and mournfully, grief stricken animal to the jungle. But then a subtle light shone into his heart. He scratched his head. He cocked it to a side. He shook it, and he thought, if the fire did not even singe my tail, it was because of Sita's prayers. Then how much more Agni would have cared for the princess herself? He couldn't have even warmed her. She is so chaste. She is divine. No flame could burn her. Suddenly he heard voices above him and he saw three bright beings flying through the sky. Their bodies seemed made of shimmering crystal, their long hair blue, casting colorful waves of light behind them. He heard clearly what they said, as if fate had willed them to pass above him at that moment. One of the Charnas of the air, for so they were, said to the others, how amazing it was to see Ravan's palace fell raging around her. All the Ashokvan was consumed, but Sita was calm at the heart of the fire, and the flames did not burn her at all, but washed over her like cool waves. Hanuman jumped up and down, he danced, he shouted out Ram's name, he decided he would see Sita once more before he left Lanka. One great leap and he landed in her presence. Her face lit up and she cried, oh Hanuman, you alone are enough to wipe Lanka from the face of the earth. You are mightier than I imagined, but fly now, good Vanar, fly to Ram with my message. Hanuman said, don't be anxious, Devi. Ram will be here in a few days with the Vanar army. Until then, may the Panchabhut, the very elements, protect you. Sita said, Fly, Hanuman, fly to my husband. Hanuman leaped back into the Trikut's summit and from there onto another mountain called Arisht. Now he grew as tall as he had been upon Mahendra across the sea. He towered into the sky like one mountain standing on another as he paced the hilltop, seeking a hard place to launch himself from. Hanuman crushed the rocks under his feet to dust, and Arisht shook just as Mahendra had. Facing north, the golden warner stared for a moment at the foaming tide far below. He crouched down, every muscle taut for the leap, with a cry that made the ocean quail. Hanuman launched himself into the air, and the Lanka shook as if with an earthquake. Like an arrow, the Vanar flew north over the waves, flashing back toward Bharatvarsh. Cobras and lions tore out of their holes and caves in terror when Hanuman leaped into the sky. Trees rose with him and fell back into the earth and into the waves, their trunks floating like twigs on the surging foam. Before he arrowed into the outer blue, he seemed to hang in the air for a moment, his body lit by the last rays of the sinking sun. He filled half the firmament like a thunder cloud streaked with lightning. Then he flew effortlessly through the soft sky, along the way of the wind, joyful that he had accomplished what he had come for, and indeed much more. Some clouds reflected the ocean below, and such a sight it was. Hanuman flashing through them, his hair fluorescent with the sunset and flocked with the sea green. At twice the speed at which he had flown to Lanka, the son of Vayu flew back to Ram with his news. Once more, Menak rose before him, a golden pyramid, a vision out of the waves. Hanuman circled the mountain, crying out his success, blessing Menak, being blessed in return. He stroked the glassy sides of the mountain of affection and folding his hands to that ancient one, flashed on. Soon he saw Mahendra looming before him and the sacred coast of Bharatvarsh. Hanuman roared his exultation to the darkening sky and clouds in it. The ocean shook, and the four quarters, the Vanars on the far shore, waiting so impatiently for him, pricked up their ears. Their faces lighting up, Angad's monkeys scarcely had time to turn to each other when, with the whistling of the air and a quaking of the earth, Hanuman landed on the summit of Mahendra. He stood for a moment on that height. He beat his chest. He cried out a long and ringing triumph and thanked his ubiquitous father for being with him on his journey. Then Hanuman shrank back to his ordinary Vanar size and ran down the mountain, bursting with his news and the joy of it. He met Angad, Jamvan, and the others halfway, for they too were agog to greet him and came running up to eagerly as he ran down. So let's stop it here today. So, any question, comment? Nobody? Jyoti?
Nobody has a question.
Nobody has a question? Okay. All right.
After there was Banasur. Who is Banasur?
There was a story before that. Banasur was a Asur, he was a king, and he is the one who captured Ravan in the past, even when Ravan was young.
Oh,
Okay. So he was a Asur of the north. Okay. So Banasur. It's a very strong, there's a long story behind that also. But Ravan was captured.
yeah.
Okay. So let me read the titles in the Hindi Valmiki Ramayan.
Hanuman why he was captured?
Ravan was captured by Banasur.
How was he captured?
It was almost like a deception. He was doing the puja, and Banasur came and captured him and put him in his prison. And he could not get out. And then there's a story that who took him out. Anybody knows? Somebody helped him, who fought with Banasur and got Ravan out.
He was in prison?
Yeah. Yeah, he was in a prison. He was in a deep prison in the dungeon. He has no way of coming out. Yeah.
I thought Rakshas could do anything and they were not punished.
It was a Banasur.
There was another king also, Bharat.
It was Banasur also. He was,
Banasur,
yeah.
2 times.
I see.
Yeah, it has been 2 times. Yeah. Yeah, he could, but somehow he could not at that time. Maybe the enemy was stronger than him.
Than him.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, Jyoti.
Urmil Chawla.
Yes, Urmil.
To unmute yourself.
No? Okay, let me just, she can ask later on. Let me finish reading the title.
Okay, I'll ask after that.
Yeah, let me just finish this.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Mike, can you turn this light on? It's kind of a dark here. Hard to read. So, Hanuman ji ke dwara Pramadavan Ashok Vatika, this is another name for that, Kar Vidvans. राक्षसियों के मुख से एक वानर के द्वारा प्रमदावन के विध्वंस का समाचार सुनकर रावण का किंकर नामक राक्षसों को भेजना और हनुमान जी के द्वारा उन सब का संहार. थैंक यू. हनुमान जी के द्वारा चैत्य प्रसाद का विध्वंस तथा उसके राक्षसों का वध. प्रहस्त पुत्र जम्बूमाली का वध, मंत्री के 7 पुत्रों का वध, रावण के 5 सेनापतियों का वध. So these are all great warriors got killed by हनुमान जी. रावण पुत्र अक्ष कुमार का पराक्रम और वध, इंद्रजीत और हनुमान जी का युद्ध, उसके दिव्य अस्त्र के बंधन में बंधकर हनुमान जी का रावण के दरबार में उपस्थित होना. रावण के प्रभावशाली स्वरूप को देखकर हनुमान जी के मन में अनेक प्रकार के विचारों का उठना. रावण का प्रहस्त के द्वारा हनुमान जी से लंका में आने का कारण पूछवाना और हनुमान का अपने को श्री राम का दूत बताना. हनुमान जी का श्री राम के प्रभाव का वर्णन करते हुए रावण को समझाना. विभीषण का दूत के वध को अनुचित बताकर उसे दूसरा कोई दंड देने के लिए कहना तथा रावण का उनके अनुरोध को स्वीकार कर लेना. राक्षसों का हनुमान जी की पूंछ में आग लगाकर उन्हें नगर में घुमाना. लंकापुरी का दहन और राक्षसों का विलाप. सीता जी के लिए हनुमान जी की चिंता और उसका निवारण. हनुमान जी का पुनः सीता जी से मिलकर लौटना और समुद्र को लांघना. हनुमान जी का समुद्र को लांघकर जामवान और अंगद आदि सुहृदों से मिलना. Okay, so up to that point we have read in English. So now Urmil.
Yeah. What I was saying is, whenever we have read a certain portion, what is the message of this? Like here, he's trying diplomacy with Ravan before Ram comes and attacks Lanka. So he's asking him to let go of Sita. He praises him for his valor and kingdom and everything, and nicely he asks him to let go of Sita. So that is his kind of diplomacy, a very good whole page of diplomacy.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
But then when he doesn't listen to him, Ravan, he goes and burns his tail. And then Hanuman is as clever as can be. He uses it to the extent of not only seeing Lanka, but burning the Lanka.
Yeah.
And so, moral of this much story is what? I mean, what is the message that we get, philosophically speaking, of this episodes that we have read today?
Yeah, we should definitely use the diplomacy, as you said. We should not jump to the conclusion to destroy the enemy. But if enemy doesn't listen, then sure, we got to do what he said.
Mm-hmm.
We did, definitely. And same thing we do with our own enemies also. I'm not talking about the external enemies. There are a lot of internal enemies. That's why the scriptures, they tell us all kind of diplomacies with our own internal enemies also.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 6 enemies which we have. Yeah, we do soothe them diplomatically. But if they don't listen to our diplomacy, see, those are the one, you remember those, the little lecture I gave you some times ago on the nitis? Those nitis are the diplomacies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Shant and Dan and the Dand and the Koot and all those nitis with our, and that's what Hanumanji is using, the niti over here. That's what diplomacy is.
Mm.
When they don't, when the enemy is not listening, yeah, you got to take a little stronger approach also. And he definitely wanted to leave a message that, hey, your enemy is not a weak enemy. I'm just a small monkey.
Yes.
So ultimately, all this can be used for us personally also.
So sometimes we are enemy of ourselves. So we need to be.
When we say we are enemy of ourself, that means our lower self becomes the enemy of the higher self.
Mm-hmm.
Our ego becomes the enemy of our real self, right? When we talk rudely, when we talk violently, when we act violently, who is making us do? Our lower self is making us do. So lower self becomes the enemy of the higher self,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That's a
Okay.
big
That was just a
lesson.
reflection on,
Yeah,
after reading,
yeah,
one
definitely.
like to reflect on it. And
Yeah, yeah, definitely. No, it's good. That's why we read all these. I don't know whether you attended yesterday class or not. We read about
no.
Dhruv. That was a Dhruv. Dhruv
Oh.
was a son of a great king, Utanpad. Utanpad is a son of Manu. Manu is a son of Brahma. So Dhruv, he did a lot of tapasya. A 5 years old young boy, tapasya for 6 months. Stop eating, stop breathing. God had to come because his goal was, I want to have the vision of God. God came right in front of him. And then he asked, ask me whatever you want. So Dhruv did not ask what he wanted to ask because there was a little vasana in him. Vasana was, he didn't like what the stepmother said to him. So it was bothering him.
Mm-hmm.
So then he goes back, gets the throne. There was a younger brother of him who was, the younger brother is the one who was sitting in father's lap, and Dhruv wanted to sit in the father's lap. So that was the little Vasana. So then the story goes that the little brother, he gets killed in some war by the Yaksha. So Dhruv got so angry. Even after having the direct vision of God, he gets very angry. Just for one brother, he kills thousands and thousands of Yaksha. Anger. So great tapasya he did. Vision of God he had, but anger was there. And that is the enemy.
Got it.
That is the enemy. So there are always enemies inside us. We got to make sure we keep on learning from these stories, do what we need to do, but make sure that we conquer all these enemies. Remember those 6 enemies: Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Ahankar, Matsarya. These are our enemies. Right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So anyway, anybody else? 11:30. So today, do we have Padmini or no?
Yeah.
Oh, Padmini is there. So because Tuesday is Padmini's day to sing a Ram bhajan for us, if she's there.
Namaste, Hershi.
Namaste, Padmini. You should
I've
keep.
been listening to you quietly. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, but you should put your video on so that I can see you. So the people who got the video on, I can see them on the screen.
Okay, I will do
Otherwise, you just, I don't know where you go, but you go somewhere else.
that.
Oh, I'm half asleep today.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, Hershi, today, it's on Hanumanji. May I do a beautiful bhajan on Hanumanji today?
Of course, definitely.
Okay. Hari Om Sharanji is one of my favorite singers.
Okay,
So this
sure.
particular bhajan, I just thought about it. I thought it would be nice to sing
Okay,
well
go ahead.
on his subject today. Thank you. हे दुख भंजन मारुति नंदन, हे दुख भंजन मारुति नंदन, सुन लो मेरी पुकार पवन सुत विनती बारंबार, पवन सुत विनती बारंबार। अष्ट सिद्धि नव निधि के दाता, दुखियों के तुम भाग्य विधाता। अष्ट सिद्धि नव निधि के दाता, दुखियों के तुम भाग्य विधाता। सिया राम के काज संवारे, सिया राम के काज संवारे, मेरा कर उद्धार पवन सुत विनती बारंबार, पवन सुत विनती बारंबार। हे दुख भंजन मारुति नंदन, सुन लो मेरी पुकार पवन सुत विनती बारंबार। अपरम पार है शक्ति तुम्हारी, तुम पर रिधे अवध बिहारी। अपरम पार है शक्ति तुम्हारी, तुम पर रिधे अवध बिहारी। भक्ति भाव से ध्याव तो है, भक्ति भाव से ध्याव तो है, कर दुखों से पार पवन सुत विनती बारंबार, पवन सुत विनती बारंबार। जपो निरंतर नाम तिहारा, जपो निरंतर नाम तिहारा। अब नहीं छोड़ू तेरा द्वारा, जपो निरंतर नाम तिहारा। अब नहीं छोड़ू तेरा द्वारा, राम भक्त मोहे शरण में लीजे, राम भक्त मोहे शरण में लीजे। भव सागर से तार पवन सुत विनती बारंबार, पवन सुत विनती बारंबार। हे दुख भंजन मारुति नंदन, सुन लो मेरी पुकार, पवन सुत विनती बारंबार, पवन सुत विनती बारंबार, पवन सुत विनती बारंबार. Thank you.
Thank you very